All right, everybody, still basking in the glow of Banner 18. We've brought in our friend returning to the podcast here. We've got Michael Pina of The Ringer is here to give us insights of what it was like to be on the ground for championship night. All that and more coming up next here on Green with Envy. Let's lock in. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. As always, this is your boy Will Weir checking in. How you doing? How you living? We are still living in this new world where the Boston Celtics are your 2024 NBA champs. And to keep the celebrations rolling, we wanted to get some insight from some boots that were on the ground. So we have brought in our good friend here from theringer.com. It is Michael Pina. Michael, how you doing today, man?
Fantastic, Will. How are you, dude?
I'm doing pretty damn good. It's hard to be doing bad after the result that we got on Monday night. So let's just start here, man, because you were in the building, and I've been seeing this across social media. So I want to ask you this: what time did you actually leave the TD Garden? Let's start there, because I know as a writer, you guys are there trying to get that story, trying to take it all in. What time did you actually leave the TD Garden?
I clocked out about 3:15,
Okay.
3:30 in the morning.
That lines up with a lot of what I've seen. It was a lot of 3 to 4 a.m.s, and did you didn't hit any of the after parties, right? Or did you find your way into one?
I'm old, so no,
Come
I
on,
had
man.
a
We're about the
nine.
same. We're not too much different in age here, but I do agree. I think that's probably crossing the line of when I'd be able to hang anymore as well.
Yeah, I had a 9 o'clock train to catch back to New York. So I was trying my best to. I left the blinds open in my hotel. I set my
Right.
alarm. I was really nervous about missing that one, so I wanted to get back to the hotel and fall asleep, get a couple hours of sleep,
Yeah,
and
basically
rest
a
up for
nap.
that
You
train
you
ride.
basically
But
took a nap and then went right back to maybe even North. I don't even know if that train was leaving out of North Station. You might have already been at the station to get back there. But it's one of those nights where there's just so much going on. So what stood out to you in this chaos as you're trying to, chase down your story, as you're trying to take in, the confetti's coming down, families and everybody's friends are coming onto the court, there's confetti everywhere, people are trying to organize a stage. I know that was something that randomly clicked into my mind, like just thinking about it as I was watching on TV is, man, it must be so difficult to coordinate setting up a stage in the middle of all this chaos. What stood out to you as you were at the Garden until 3:15 in the morning?
I mean, I felt this at every finals. I've been fortunate enough to cover every finals finale, the last game of the season, where I just want to clone myself because there's so many places that you want to be. You want to be in the winning locker room. I was writing about the Celtics, so it made it a little easier. But you want to. I
Yeah.
mean, I've always had a really, maybe because I'm a sick person, but I've always found the most intrigue in the losers locker room. I think that's like
Interesting.
by far the most fascinating place to be, and where some of the more interesting stories can be told. That wasn't my assignment that night, which kind of simplified things. But you want to be um, on the court at all. Like you want to see what's happening on the court. You want to be in the interview rooms, and you don't want to miss anything really juicy that's said, even though you can just get the transcript later. But seeing it
Right.
in person or asking questions for stories that you might have. There's so many people you want to talk to, so many perspectives you want to try to absorb. And you just, in my head, I'm feeling constantly like I'm missing out on something, even as I'm doing something else. So it's trying to focus on like the moment that you're in. And I do a terrible job at that. So tried to enjoy it the best I could, knowing also that I had to work and write a
Right.
column that night and find an angle, and just try not to barf out 1,200 words of crap. And I think we did okay, but yeah, those are pretty much my memories. It was just very, very chaotic
Yeah,
scene.
And just for the record, the article you did put out, Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, put the drama to bed. It was a great article, and we're going to talk about that more here in just a minute. So I just want to make sure we didn't continue the interview here without letting you know you did do a great job and you got it done here. But I am curious, just sticking with trying to be in that moment. I can totally envision what you're saying of you're doing your job, but also this is such a special moment that there's a part of you that wants to take a mental photograph or a mental memory. Then there's another part of you that wants to physically document it, pull out your phone at the right moment, capture something that, you can have, but then also, once again, you're doing your job. So I am curious, is there a particular interaction that, as you're taking this almost voyeuristic approach, looking at some of these people that are celebrating the moment of their lives, the culmination of all this work, and especially when you look at some of the players and coaching, the scrutiny that's gone into it, and a lot has been made about just the weight that you can almost visually see drop off a guy like Jayson Tatum's shoulders when this is all over because of what he's been bearing. So I'm curious, was there a particular interaction or moment that you witnessed from afar that really stood out to you?
It's probably really silly, but I try to take photos and videos not for any other reason than um I have a terrible memory. And so when I'm writing, sometimes I'll go back to a photo or a video to jog my memory of what a scene looked like or something like that. I didn't ended up not doing that for any of the stories that I've written so far, but so I had all these videos on my phone, and I was standing in the back hallway of TD Garden where all the players leave the court and walk to the locker room. And so I was standing there and I caught Jayson Tatum walking off the court, shouting an expletive with his son and his mom um, on both sides of him as he was holding the Larry O'Brien trophy as he was walking down the hallway. And then something that just kind of I thought was really interesting. A couple other players came out, and there was a security guard there who was separating coaches and players from their family members. And so the players had to go to the locker room, and on the opposite way down the hallway was the family room. So this security guy was saying, "Oh, family this way, players this way." And when Al Horford came out, um, he received the instruction from the security guard. He's got like all of his kids around him, his wife, so
The
much
Horfords roll
family.
deep. They roll deep.
Yeah,
The Horfords roll deep. You can tell that. Yeah.
right. So there's a huge family, a huge throng just surrounding Al, and he had this big smile on his face. And he's told that family's going this way, you got to go this way. And he like pauses, and he looks like really perplexed for a moment, and he looks really stressed out all of a sudden. And he's like, "All right," and he walks with his whole family to the family room. And I know that he obviously went back to the locker room by himself and
Right.
celebrated with the team, but I just thought that was a really cool moment. And um he just like his brain just like froze, and he's like, "I can't leave my family at this moment in time. I'm not ready for it." And so I just thought that was really cool. um but there's a lot of stuff like that. There's like a million different little interactions and tidbits, and being in the winning locker room, having Sam Cassell just like douse you in champagne, and you're like, I'm not as rich as you. I don't have the same type of budget for a wardrobe. Like, these are some of my nicer clothes. Can we please stop?
Right. You
But
gotta
it
you gotta
was
get you gotta get the poncho and the goggles on. I think that's gonna be operation number one when you get in there.
very fair, very true. So that was all just really, really cool. It's like one of those scenes where when you turn your head left or right, you don't know what you're gonna see. Like Wick Grousbeck is standing next to me for 5 minutes, and I don't even realize it, and he's smoking a cigar. I'm like, "What is burning right now?" You turn your head, and it's the owner of the Celtics smoking a cigar. Um, just stuff like that. It was really
Right.
memorable, and stuff that I won't forget anytime soon.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this earlier today. I saw a clip of Jaylen Brown walking down one of the back hallways, the TD Garden, smoking a cigar. And I do think it's funny how all the rules and regulations just go out the window
Oh
at
yeah,
at a moment like this. People are lighting up cigars everywhere, like it's the TD, like it's the old Garden, right back in the 80s or the 70s. And so it is funny to be in that moment in time. And like you said, you turn left, you turn right, you can see something new. You never quite sure what you're gonna see. let's go on back onto the court here for a minute and talk about this series. And I want to start here, Michael. I don't know what your prediction was before the series, but I know, and obviously I host this show about the Celtics as a fan, from a fan perspective, slightly biased, but I do like to try to ground myself in the reality of where this team is at. And I was genuinely very shocked that across the media landscape, so many analysts felt like the Mavericks were going to win this series and had chosen the Mavericks in 6 or 7. And listen, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but I really looked at kind of the matchups and the way that the Celtics and Mavs, like the different problems they could present with one another, and I just didn't see the path for the Mavs beyond Luka doing something we've never seen, which he's that type of player. So entirely possible. And so, I'm just curious, are you surprised at how this series played out with the Celtics essentially a gentleman's sweep here?
So I'm wrong a lot. I'll start by saying that. My prediction on we did a finals entrance survey on theringer.com, and my prediction was Celtics in 5. So I was correct with that. And the reason first of all, I share your disbelief and surprise with some of the predictions that were coming out. And, you see all this stuff about the money. It's like 90% of bets on Sportsbook X are on the Mavericks and stuff like that. And I was fascinated by that because I don't know if it was the fact that the Celtics benefited from injuries to Jimmy Butler and Donovan Mitchell and Tyrese Halliburton. If it was their reputation as a team that couldn't get over the hump, if it was Kristaps Porzingis' injury, which is a legitimate concern coming into the finals, that bore true in a lot of ways. If it was them not having the best player in the series, if it was the Dallas Mavericks really impressive momentum in their run through the number 1 seed Oklahoma City Thunder, beating a Minnesota Timberwolves team without home court advantage that had just dethroned the Denver Nuggets in 7 games. To me, it was like, you got to look at every series as it's a matchup. Like, the NBA playoffs are all about matchups. And I thought that was totally lost on a lot of people. I didn't see defensively how, and this is interesting because I thought it would have been a lot of a higher scoring series than it was. I'm kind of shocked by just how impotent Dallas's offense was. And then also, I thought that, if you just look at the numbers overall, and it's a 5-game sample size, so it's tough to take anything too dramatic away from it. And if you look at the on-offs for the series, actually, like, when Tatum's on the court, their offense was like absurdly great. But overall, their offensive rating was just like bad. And it was really the Celtics, and it was really interesting because I think it's when I watched their offense play, I thought that they were really good in a lot of really important ways, and they were their identity. They were the best offense in the history of basketball, most efficient offense in the history of basketball in this series in terms of the shots that they were getting and how they were playing. They never really had to make any adjustments until some slight defensive things that they did on Luka in Game 5 defensively. But I thought that Luka, I think he entered this series as an underrated defender. I thought that did not matter, and that when you have nowhere to hide on defense, you can be exposed when he's underrated, but he's still like he's not, Lou Dort, you know what I mean? So I thought that he would have a difficult place hiding against a team that can spread you out with at all times 5 3-point shooters on the court, save Xavier Tillman. And then I also thought that Kyrie Irving would also be a defensive liability and would be exposed on that side of the ball. And both those things were true for a majority of the series. I thought that, Dallas's defense I watched a lot of their games in preparation for the series. I watched a lot of their games against the Oklahoma City Thunder and how they guarded that team, because that's kind of like a JV version of the Celtics. And they're trying to build like the Celtics. They want to be 5 out. Unfortunately, they have some guys who aren't knockdown 3-point shooters on their team. So there's no Josh Giddey on the Celtics. Aaron Wiggins shot 50% or something from the 3-point line in the regular season, and he was played off the court in that series and completely ineffective. Lou Dort shot 40% from 3-point line during the regular season, and the Dallas Mavericks did not care, which was smart because it's
a
like
little bit of a. We used to always compare a lot of those shot percentages to. He catches a lot of strays in our show for some reason, but Semi Ojeleye. Back in the day, Semi would have a high 30s, 40%, but you could find a pretty strong correlation as to how open those threes were and why they're open. Now, obviously, Lou Dort, far greater player than Semi Ojeleye, but just using that as a Celtic example.
Right, and then not only that, but you can help off the non-shooters or whatever, but also a lot of the guys on that team, and Aaron Wiggins is one, Dort is another, and Chet Holmgren is another. When you ran them off the line, if that was your intent, they are not Drew Holiday, they're not Derek White, they're not even like Al Horford, who put it on the deck several. I mean, the first basket of the series of the finals was him pump faking Daniel Gafford in the corner, driving the closeout and dunking it. He made a couple plays like that in the playoffs. So the Celtics are just they flow through their offense. It's a well-oiled machine. A lot of drive and kick with space. And I thought that if Tatum and Brown were going to be, I anticipated a switch-heavy defense on Dallas's part, because that's what they've done throughout the playoffs, switch and help behind aggressively. And I thought that if you beat the first layer, which Tatum and Brown can do like in their sleep, you'd force help and there would be wide open shots. And there were wide open shots and from elite 3-point shooters. It's why the Celtics won 64 games. So I just wasn't surprised at all by
I'm
the
totally
outcome.
with you. I feel like this played out the way there's times where you preview a playoff series and you feel really good about it. And you're like, everything makes sense. And then all of a sudden it just does not look like the way that you previewed it. And sometimes that happens. I feel like in this scenario, it basically played out the way that, and we had 10 days to sit with this. So there was a lot of time to be able to, like you said, go back and watch that OKC film and kind of figure out what makes the most sense. And at the end of the day, I just felt like, if the Celtics ever needed to adjust, which they really didn't, they had multiple ways to do that. The Mavericks just didn't have as many answers as the Celtics had. And I think the crazy part about it all is the Celtics didn't shoot the ball very well in this series. Now, eye test wise, it looks like they got, for the most part, they got really good shots. They honestly just didn't shoot the ball well. And if you were the Mavericks fan coming into the series and you said, what's one of our ways that we can win this series and you were given, hey, Celtics are going to shoot 33.8% from three and under 44% from the field, you would have taken that. I would imagine you probably would have taken that off the bat as like, yeah, I can work with those chances. And, aside from that game 4 disaster, it really felt like the Celtics were in control of this series just about all the way through, despite, some of the runs that the Mavericks had. Once again, they were only runs because the Celtics were up 18, 20 points, whatever it might be. And so, I'm curious, when you look at this finals, it's 5 games. Was there a particular moment that will stand out for you when you think back to the series, that either this is the moment that I knew the Celtics were going to win the championship, or this is the moment I knew this matchup just wasn't for the Mavericks? Is there anything that maybe comes to mind across these 5 games?
That's a really good question. You mean besides Peyton Pritchard's half-court heaves?
Right. That's the electric moment of the series. And just real quick, I want you to answer that question before, but how insane was that moment just being there in the building?
I've been to a lot of Celtics games in my life. Used to cover the team full time, and the loudest the arena had ever been, in my opinion, was the first game Isaiah Thomas played in when his sister passed away, and he scored something like he dropped 50 plus. They won. It was a playoff game, and the arena, that was like the loudest I've ever heard any arena I've ever been in. The Peyton Pritchard shot in game 5, when it left his hands, it's everyone. It was weird. It was like the whole building knew it was going in, and they were just waiting for it to go in the hoop. And when it did, it was just like beyond palpable. That was the loudest I've ever heard anything in my life, probably. But in terms of just what, I wouldn't say there's any particular moment. What I would say when I think about this series, what I will think about the most is Jayson Tatum beating Derek Lively over and over and over again off the dribble on switches. And I thought that that was like the whole series. And I thought that there was no, like, Dallas couldn't win if Lively wasn't, because Lively had a really awesome defensive postseason up until that point. He was great. He had a like a monumental stop in game 2 of the conference finals against the Timberwolves, where he stayed in front of Anthony Edwards, who's one of the hardest players to stay in front of in the world, and eventually forced a turnover right before Luka hit the step back over Rudy Gobert. And Dallas was really depending on Derek Lively's quick feet and long arms to bother Jayson Tatum on the perimeter, and he didn't do it. And so that was like it for me. If there's really nothing you can do if you can't guard your yard, like that's your whole strategy. There's nothing you can do besides give up open threes. And Boston took more threes in this series than they did in any of their other series. So that was it for me. I thought that after game 1, watching that, if you're Jason Kidd, he knew, to be honest, he knew that they were in a lot of trouble. And it's a part of the reason why he said the thing about Jaylen Brown being the best player. I think he knew that that was a huge component of their defensive strategy. And they absolutely needed to contain the ball on the perimeter, and they couldn't do it with pretty much anybody. So when I think about this series, I'll think about Tatum putting his head down, getting to the basket, drawing help, kicking out, finding shooters, finding Drew in the dunker spot, I thought Tatum was like so brilliant in the series. And I don't know if we're going to talk about Finals MVP, because it's like I always thought Finals MVP was really stupid, and I always thought that the NBA should have a postseason MVP like hockey does, because it's a 4, 5, 6, 7 game sample size. Like, weird stuff happens, and it doesn't really indicate who's the best player or most valuable player. It's too small of a sample. But for me, it was like borderline, no disrespect at all to Jaylen Brown, who's amazing, borderline bizarre that Jayson Tatum was not the MVP of the finals. I don't really agree at all with the voters who voted for Jaylen Brown.
Yeah,
I understand their case, but I just don't agree with it.
It is a little strange, and honestly, it felt like the weight of Jaylen Brown's first 3 games, and not that Tatum was bad in those first games, especially in game 3. I thought Tatum was exceptional. And then you add in what he did in game 5. And, it felt like because he was the favorite, there was part of me that wasn't surprised that it kept with that narrative that Jaylen Brown just kind of took that momentum from early in the series and ended up with the finals MVP. I mean, I don't know if this is cheesy or not. I think it's probably the way that I think would have made the most sense. It would have been a really cool part of this story if they could have been co-MVPs. Obviously, there's 11 votes, unless somebody snuck in a vote for Drew Holiday and it was 5-5. That wasn't going to happen, and no one knows what they're voting. But that honestly probably would have been the most appropriate. But when you look at the fact that, and you tweeted this out, and I've seen it posted in a bunch of places, Jayson Tatum leads the team in points, rebounds, and assists. And the only other people in that category are LeBron, I think 3 times, Bird twice, Jokic, Hakeem, and Duncan, and you don't come away with the Finals MVP. That is a little strange when you think about that particular category, but it also exemplifies, the Jays and what their whole career has been. Can they play together? Is one better than the other? And I told you we're going to talk about that article that you put out in the wee hours here in the morning for theringer.com, and you kind of explored their selfless mentality and how that impacted this championship. So tell me a little bit more about how that impacted this championship directly with the growth of the Jays.
Yeah, I think that when you look at what they did in the last two postseason runs in the biggest, most important moments, whether it's Jayson Tatum in the 2022 finals, just I think a little bit of his shooting. Like, I don't personally care so much about shot making as other people, but his shot making wasn't there in that finals. And then more importantly, his decision making wasn't fast enough. His turnovers were too high. He was sloppy with the ball. The decision making just and the reads and the identification of what the defense was trying to do wasn't there. And that was because he's the primary ball handler. So that was a night and day growth from him from that series to this series. Jaylen Brown, very similar in a lot of ways in terms of just understanding not to play in a crowd, understanding when to get off it. They preach all the time about taking advantage of 2-on-1 advantages and benefiting from them because there's so much defensive attention for Tatum and for Jaylen. And I thought both of them played off of the lever of the attention that they get brilliantly in the series. And we're making quick, snappy passes. We're trusting their teammates. And that was real growth on the biggest stage. And so for them to do that while still finding ways to complement one another. And I have like a couple of clips in the story that are just, Tatum making pick and roll reads to hit Jaylen Brown for wide open threes. And that's like it's like a tip of the iceberg part of it. But I always thought that it was really silly that they couldn't complement one another. Whether you're talking about, it's just the whole like projection and the point of having two really great two-way wings on your team is just like the defensive and the offensive versatility. And I thought the defensive versatility was incredible. One of the reasons why I think Tatum is one of the 5 best players alive is what he brings on the table on the defensive end. And a huge part of the series when Boston was trying to get stops was just the fact that they had a 6'9", 6'10" forward who could guard the opposing team's center, and for 4 of the games, just completely keep him off the offensive glass, whether it's Lively or Gafford. And so you do that and you're able to switch those screens. All of a sudden it's iso ball and Luka and Kyrie are playing inside the 3-point line with no kick out to the corner. And that's the difference between how Boston's able to guard Dallas and how Oklahoma City is able to guard Dallas and Minnesota is able to guard Dallas. And so I thought that just having Tatum do that and then having Jaylen really harass Luka as good as a human being can.
Yeah.
He was incredible on ball. He was shadowing him in his jersey the entire series, and he deserves just a ton of credit for that, because to be that physical and that aggressive with someone like Luka, not only is it exhausting, but there's a constant threat of you getting in foul trouble. And so to avoid that and showing that type of discipline, people want to talk about Jaylen's undisciplined off-ball defense. It takes like a ton of discipline to be on ball against Luka and not foul out immediately. So a ton of credit to him for that. And I think that in the mind of the people who voted for him for Finals MVP, I think his defense on Luka was a huge part of that. But for me, I thought that, I just think that they complement each other really well on both ends, and their ability to make the most also of being on the court with Derek White, with Drew Holiday on those small screens, getting them the ball quick in the pocket. There's no it's just those passes are really hard to make. And especially against a defense that knows that that's what you want to do, like hit the slip, on time, on target. Yeah. So with that, and then playing in space with KP and Horford, and yeah, so they just I thought they grew a ton as playmakers. They complemented one another on both ends, and when it mattered, they hit huge shots. So they were great, and they deserve all the praise that anyone can give them at this point. They're champions.
Yeah, and I think when talking about the Finals MVP, I think you really nailed it with the voters looking at Jaylen's impact and responsibility of having to set the tone with Luka. And, we got some really great sound bites from Jaylen Brown in that game 5. I know you were obviously in there. I'm sure maybe you've seen them on social media where, he's telling Joe, if Luka's in, I'm in. If Luka wants the ball, he's going to have to bring it up. If he lets go of that ball, I'm not letting him get it back. And there's different things of Jaylen Brown really taking that onus on. I know right after the game, I kind of compared it to this is a superior version of Andre Iguodala winning the MVP award, in the sense that Jaylen Brown was damn near close to being on par with Jayson Tatum offensively, but it was his defensive responsibilities, which in that case it was Iguodala with LeBron, and in this case it was Jaylen and what he was doing with Luka to, as you said, harass him the best way that a human being can, because Luka is that type of dude where, I mean, if you just look at points, rebounds, and assists, and even those are a little bit lower than what we expect, they're still pretty crazy numbers, right? Because Luka's going to find a way to get to some of those. And so I think that's where it lends itself that Jaylen got a few extra votes over Tatum. What I'm curious to ask you, and I'm going to ask you to kind of speculate. You can speak for yourself, but also I'm curious as like the media as a whole. What do you think this championship, and a lot of it's going to be focused on what it does for Tatum, because Tatum's that guy that's in that top 5. And, I think I heard someone say this the other day. I thought it was really great that right now the NBA is so talented. There's probably about 8 top 5 guys. I'm with you. I think Tatum's solidified in that 4 or 5 spot somewhere. Like, he's in that top 5. You don't even need to qualify it. But I'm curious, what do you think this does for a guy like Jaylen Brown, who just missed out on All NBA this last season? I'm curious to know, from a reputation, from a narrative standpoint, through the media, what winning Eastern Conference Finals MVP followed up with the NBA Finals MVP, and all the questions that lingered in the offseason of, is this guy a $300 million? And of course, the market's the market. Like, some people understood that. Other people would just see the number and question, is Jaylen Brown worth that money? Well, Banner 18's here, so damn, and he won the Finals MVP. So number one, yes, I think he's worth it. But I'm curious, what do you think this does for Jaylen Brown's reputation and narrative in the media going forward?
I would hope that it lifts it, and you don't want to make too much of, like, I really agree with a lot of what Brad Stevens said when it comes to he's very process over results oriented in his mindset. And so, after they won it all, he said, this doesn't really change a lot of how I view Jaylen or Jayson Tatum. They don't need to actually win the championship to validate just the type of players that they are. And I think that there's a lot of truth there, because what people forget is that it's a team game. And so, like, like, you think about all the shots that Michael Jordan's teammates hit in the finals when he passed them the ball, and if like that shot doesn't go in, then he loses 2 finals. It could lose 2. You know what I mean? So it's a team game first and foremost. So sometimes, like, the results of a team versus team don't go a certain player's way, despite a player impacting winning possession by possession by possession. They shouldn't be punished for that. That said, the world we live in, when you do win a championship, you are viewed differently. And to win Finals MVP, there are so many people who have been alive who can say that they are a Finals MVP, and it forever changes how you're perceived. And I think that when you look at, like, for me, Jaylen's, hitting the shot in Game 3 over Tim Hardaway Jr. when they were up to put them up 4 with like 40 something seconds left. Like that's a shot. Like that's just like he hit that shot. You can't ever take that away. Hitting the corner 3 over Pascal Siakam in Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals. Right. That's a shot. That's like, it's just, you can't really put
it's
it
all
into words.
Time. It's in the highlight reel that, if he is to continue to the Hall of Fame, that's one of the main shots that you're going to see. Like when you think of and when you speak of Jaylen Brown and when you speak of the playoffs, those are all going to be in that mix.
Yeah, humongous stuff. The on-ball defense we already talked about on Luka. The just ferocity he played with attacking the basket. It's funny because he wasn't particularly efficient in the finals either, but he did a lot of little things and he made a ton of winning plays in a way that he wasn't doing, to be frank, like even last year. I was at Game 7 against the Miami Heat. He was horrendous. He was a total mess. I think he had 8 turnovers in that game. And so having the confidence to have the ball as much as he does, a lot of their offense was Jaylen calling up a switch, calling up Luka. In the first 2 games, particularly, and I should say the first 3 games, I mean, Luka couldn't stay in front of Tatum, but he forget about staying in front of Jaylen. And Jaylen, when he beat him, made a ton of really smart decisions and reads, and he was amazing. So we do a top 100 ranking at the Ringer, and we just had a meeting yesterday to kind of set our post-finals ranking, which should be coming out very soon. And I won't spoil where Jaylen is, but he was in the top 30 last time, and he's safely in the top 20 now. So he jumped
significant jump. Quite a significant jump, it sounds
like.
He
made as big of a jump as anybody, I think, in our list. And look, like, you can I agree with parts of what Brad said, where it's like this guy was awesome all season long. I voted him to be on my 3rd team All NBA. I thought he was incredible. Coming off the huge contract, being better,
And I actually have a question for you on that. And because this is kind of where the origin of this question came for me. Is, I absolutely, I'm with you. I clearly I don't have a vote, but I obviously really thought Jaylen should have been 2nd or 3rd team. And I was very surprised that he didn't get any 2nd team consideration. I thought certainly around that 9-10 spot. I thought he might get some 2nd team consideration. All of his votes were 3rd team NBA. But when I was thinking about how does the media world for Jaylen Brown change going forward, is I think if everything were the same next year at the end of the season when we're voting for All NBA and people are teetering, is Jaylen Brown 2nd or 3rd team? I think now when you get, and this is to the victor go the spoils, when you're like, man, am I really going to leave Eastern Conference Finals and Finals MVP Jaylen Brown off of my All NBA ballot, even if he sacrifices, he made all the sacrifices statistically, and some of that was in consideration. But I think if the way the voting turned out this year is now next year, with him being a champion, I think there's no doubt in my mind that he makes one of those All NBA teams. And that's, for me, where I think things will change for the Jaylen Brown discussion or discourse going forward. Is, like you said, he's going to make a jump from just under 30 to now he's going to be closer to 15 in the Ringer rankings. And, I think if there's any kind of question of who am I going with, you're going with the champion. You're going with the Finals MVP. And so I think next year, if he finds himself in a similar All NBA situation, he will 100% find himself getting the nod or getting the benefit of the doubt versus not, which is what I think happened this year.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. it shouldn't be that way, right?
Right.
But I do think that a lot of voters, you know, if you're, it's a tie goes to the runner sort of
Mm-hmm.
situation, which is what you're describing. And if someone like, you know, Domantas Sabonis is not to crap on him because I had him on my third team as well, but
Right. But there's a
if
bunch of guys, whether it's even Devin Booker, who I think is awesome. But I mean, you know, the Suns underachieved this entire year, and they got two guys on the All NBA. So if you're like, all right, we got to put Durant. Durant's clearly a second team guy. You know, I do think there's going to be, and like you said, it probably shouldn't be this way, but in reality, this is going to be the thought process for a lot of people. Is, you know what, I'm going to go with Jaylen Brown because, you know, he won Finals MVP, even though it has nothing to do with what's going to happen in the particular season they're voting for All NBA. I do think that is going to lean some more voters based on reputation, that he's going to get the nod in situations like that.
yeah, I think that's totally fair. I did leave Devin Booker off of my All NBA team, and part of it was the teams underachieving. You know, I wrote this piece earlier in the season that I got absolutely killed for. Like the headline was something like Devin Booker's the best point guard in the NBA, and he was playing great at the time in that role.
Yeah.
But you know, just no, that was a swing and a miss on my part. And I think that when I watched, you know, the playoffs, it was a really short series in the first round, but a lot of that was how I felt was validated when it comes down to how important defense is,
Mm-hmm.
how important, just like if you aren't doing one thing, like the thing that this is why I don't put too much stock in shot making, because if you're not making the shots and you're a tough shot maker, okay, what are you doing then? And it's not like Devin Booker doesn't impact winning in a lot of ways, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But in that series, it was like the first 3 games, he's getting taken out of it by Jaden McDaniels. And it's like, okay, well, this team has no chance now. If you're not going to average 28, 29 efficiently, and you can't do that. And so seeing that was really, you know, if I'm comparing these two players, like I honestly, right now, today, I don't know who's the quote unquote better player. I don't know if you were to take a poll of all the GMs in the league who they would rather have on their team right now, frankly, just because Jaylen has done it.
Right.
Jaylen has, particularly on the defensive end, like Jaylen did it on the defensive end. He assumes so many different, I think, if anything, next year when we look at all defensive teams,
Mm-hmm.
I think reputationally, he will have made a huge jump in that department with voters, and that could
Yeah,
be an
that's a
area
great
where you
point.
see him maybe get some more votes and maybe crack a team, to be honest. But part of what makes the Celtics so great is like, to me, I had Drew. Did I have Drew on my team? I don't even remember if I had Drew on one of my own defensive teams, but it's like Drew made it, Derek White made it. And then, like, I think that Jayson Tatum, before he retires, he'll make an all defensive team. I think he's like an incredible defensive player. And the biggest adjustment that the Mavericks made
Yeah.
from games 1 to game 2 was like, we're going to just play our basketball and have whoever's guarding a big set a ball screen. And it's like, well, if you do that, then Jayson Tatum's going to switch on to you. So good luck with that strategy. And it didn't really
Yeah.
work out for them. So
Yeah, I think the Celtics really need the NBA to go to 3 all defensive teams, because that was part of my thing, was like, listen, guys, there's only 10 spots. Like, we're probably going to get 2. They're not going to squeeze 3 or 4 on here. And of course, you know, Drew and Derek got the nods here. We got just a couple minutes left here with you, Michael. So I want to pivot a little bit here, because I'm becoming more and more fascinated with the legend that is becoming Joe Mazzulla. He's a fascinating individual all of last year. And, you know, I think with time and space to really reflect on the situation he was put in, I'm glad to see that a lot of people kind of came around, myself included, of like, man, this guy was in such a tremendously unfair position when he took over this team. And I've said it for a long time. The worst thing that could have happened was how hot they started last season, because then it felt like, oh, Joe's got this. Everything should be going smoothly. But then, of course, he loses some of his assistant coaches for various reasons. And at the end of the day, he's 35 years old, 34 years old last year. And so that's a lot of pressure. But Joe has really kind of come into his own this season. He's talked a lot more about being more comfortable. We've seen more personality. I joked in his rookie year or his rookie head coaching year that he felt very robotic. He was acting as if the way that he interpreted a coach should act, as opposed to just being himself and being authentic. We've seen a lot more of that. And it's a very interesting, authentic side to Joe Mazzulla. So I'm curious, in your time covering the finals and throughout the year, if you had any opportunities to get some further insight on Joe Mazzulla and what your thoughts were on him, both as a coach and as a unique, eccentric individual.
Certainly unique. No doubt about that. I voted him third for coach of the year last year, and he was my number one coach. He was top of my ballot for coach of the year this year. I think he's already one of the best in the league. I think his perspective on just like the way he views the game is so similar to, okay, so a quote he gave after game 5 that I loved, and is something that I also, how I view basketball is, he was asked about how impressive it was for the Celtics to finish first in offensive rating, and I think they finished second in defensive rating, top 3, and
Yeah, I think it was second.
defensive rating and first in net rating and all this sort of stuff, and whether that validates, how he plays and all the, the strategies and game plans that he's um enacted with his team. And he said, like, those are actual numbers. We don't live in an actual world. We live in an expected world. And it's all about process. It's all about, are you playing the right way regardless of the result? And I think results are obviously really important. It's a results oriented business, obviously. But when your mind is focused on the process versus the result, as his is, good things usually happen. So if Josh Green hits 2 threes at this first quarter because of how they're guarding Luka with, when KP is getting hunted in game 5, we're not going to completely just go away from that, because we trust that that's not the greatest shot for that possession for the Dallas Mavericks and that they can't subsist on that. We're not going to like double Daniel Gafford when he posts up Jayson Tatum, even though he scores 3 times in a row. We're not going to do that, because that's taking them out of what they want to do. And if you look at a points per 100 possessions basis, that's really not going to win you a basketball game. Mm-hmm. So I think that over the course of games and the course of seasons and series, just his commitment to his own like belief. I mean, this is, I think, like a really good example of this actually is in the conference finals. If you look at their mid-range numbers that the Indiana Pacers shot, like they were lights out, on fire. Mm-hmm. And you would think that, okay, well, Boston's defense is doing something wrong. It's like, no, actually, Boston's defense is really like doing everything right, and they're just hitting the shots. And eventually, things will tilt back into Boston's favor. So, I just agree with a lot of like how he views things, his approach, and then actually what he wants to implement and what he believes in, like the actual game plans, I think are really smart. And he benefits from having a roster that is like almost perfect. Like Boston's roster is just, it is an incredible roster. There's no coincidence that this team went 16-3 on the way to a title, with the second highest winning percentage any team has had since we went to 7-game series in the NBA finals. Like, that's not a coincidence. You have 5 guys at all times who can shoot 3-pointers. You have all defensive team members, or should be all defensive team members, at basically every position. There's so much versatility on both ends. But you need a coach who understands what the right scheme is and what the right game plan is. And he does. And he maximized everything. And so I think he's amazing. I think that the runway is there for him to have just an absolutely incredible career. All the things can change really quick, as we saw with Ime Udoka, but the runway is there for Joe Mazzulla to have immense success. His two best players are 26 and 27 years old, and he already won a championship. And Brad Stevens believes in him, and Brad Stevens is really good at his job, and the front office is really good and really shrewd and really resourceful. So I think he's in a perfect situation. I think that he deserves a lot more credit than he's gotten. Maybe that will come with the title. But I also thought that before they won the title, that a lot of the criticism he received didn't make a ton of sense to me personally. And I thought he was really good considering the circumstances last season, like really, really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
And then this year, you're historically one of the best teams in the history of the league. And I thought he killed it there too.
Let me ask you, if you were given the choice, you're going to be able to hang out with Joe Mazzulla and you have to watch one of these two movies with him. Are you going to watch The Town or are you going to watch The Dark Knight with him?
I feel like, I'd rather watch. I think The Dark Knight's a better movie than The Town. Big fan of The Town, love it a lot. I'd rather probably just watch The Dark Knight, so we'll go with that. But plus, I feel like he would be bored watching The Town again and not be as into.
I don't know, man. His personality sounds like he seems like one of those guys when he likes something, he just does. I mean, The Dark Knight was in the reason I asked if The Dark Knight was in that group of movies that, along with The Town, he continues to watch over and over again. There was a clip going around today where he talked about using The Dark Knight as a teaching tool with Jayson Tatum, as far as how to deal with the media and the scrutiny. And he talked about the scene where Batman's in the interrogation room with the Joker, and the paraphrasing here, but bad and evil coexist, or good and evil, coexisting within one. So I don't know if you can go wrong either way. I think that would be, here's what you got to do. You got to bring this to Bill and ask your boss, Bill Simmons here. Can we get a rewatch? I know they've already done probably the rewatchables with both these movies. In fact, I know they have with The Town. I assume they have with The Dark Knight. But you need to do a rewatchables 2.0 and get Joe Mazzulla in the mix. I think that's the new plan of what we need to try to make happen here, and see what happens. Just see what happens. We don't even have to be on the show. We can let Bill and Mazzulla do it. We'll just be a fly on the wall. I would love to see how that all goes down. But for real, Michael, this has been an awesome season for the Celtics, and I appreciate you taking the time to chop it up with me here today and kind of give us your insights on the season and being there in the building. I know you mentioned Ringer Top 100 is coming out sometime here in the near future, it sounds like, with their post NBA championship rankings. Anything else that you have coming up before we really hit the thick of free agency? And I know that you'll be back covering all of those comings and goings across the league.
Yeah, I have a story that should be coming out tomorrow. That's a feature about someone who works for the Celtics, and that's all I'm gonna say. But really looking forward to that story coming out, and I spent a lot of time on it. So go to theringer.com tomorrow morning, and if you see my byline, that'd be super duper if you clicked on it and read it. That'd be fun.
Thursday morning, everybody. Whenever you listen to this, Thursday morning is when this will be live on theringer.com. So make sure you go check out our friend here, Michael Pina. Michael, appreciate you joining us. That is going to do it for this episode of Green with Envy. We'll be checking back in with you guys here throughout the week. Parade is on Friday, so if you're going to be in Boston, enjoy the day. Chance I might be there as well, so I will let you know. Make sure you're following us on social media, and would love to connect and link up. But as we do always here, let's send you out with the Little Black Sheep Optimists, and make sure that you subscribe to their new single here, which will get you set up for the summertime. We will catch you guys later. Peace. It feels like summer, baby. Oh mama, feel like summer. New season got me seeing new colors. So fly, the sky will kiss you. Lips so smooth, I miss your issues. Oh mama, feel like summer. New season got me seeing new colors. Oh my, I'm slipping into white lies and time to miss you. Now you 3 shots
deep that you chase with the Croy. You're looking at me while you're making that noise. I've been trying to stay clean, but you